Pasta, you're free to stay for like the rest of the panel. We're about to talk about other elections in Syria.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing too,
Yeah.
right, Franco? They tell you the way they go in there and they manufacture consent for their regime changes. They talk about their elections. Their elections are phony, they're fake, and whatnot, and yet they don't tell you the specifics. And that's the whole thing. We have this kind of it makes sense mentality.
Yeah.
And just because it makes sense, well, it makes sense. A lot of people hated Trump, so they would vote him out and vote for Biden. Well, it makes sense that that the ballots would come in late for Joe Biden. No. It makes sense that Assad's cheating his elections because he wants to hold on to power, but they can never tell you the specifics of where he was cheating and how he was cheating, and that's why it's so friggin' ridiculous.
And they also fabricate like they said that some provinces didn't vote, and then that contributed as cheating, but it's like those provinces were under like US or like other countries' control or whatever, and they couldn't vote. It's like those provinces were pretty much annexed.
They also don't tell you that in some provinces they're actually bombing people, and people got to run out in between the bombs to go vote. That's how important it was to them. You know what I'm saying?
So I heard reports that they were bombing last night. Israel bombed western part of Damascus last night.
I'm losing track because they bomb them all the time.
Right, that's like all the time.
But it was like it was almost like a statement about the election kind of thing.
Yeah, and Israel bombed Syria like last week. That's what we discussed with Glory, Steven, and Anthony. But yeah, the narrative that they run is that he's a dictator, and people don't ask enough questions. You just have to ask people, all right, where did like if you want to really open people's minds, just ask them for evidence. I was like, where did you hear that? Oh, I heard it from the New York Times. I heard it from the Washington Post. Oh, well, here's an article that debunks that. Or if like I heard it from the BBC. Oh, well, here is an Eva Bartlett article that debunks that. So yeah, I wanted to open up with an Eva Bartlett article. It's called Syrians fill the polling stations to defend their sovereignty and now fill the streets to celebrate the results. So I just want to read this part here because she's debunking a BBC article. And she's talking about one of the journalists there said he also noted that the media's claims of Sunni Muslims hating Assad had no basis in reality. Never mind the fact that the First Lady is Sunni, as are many in top leadership positions, tweeting photos of masses of Sunnis voting. So she's talking about this other journalist that's in Syria. He works for the Syrian Analyst or something like that. How there's people that are filling the streets that are excited that Assad won. They're showing people voting for Assad. The Guardian, guilty of some of the filthiest war propaganda against Syrians and usually reporting from Istanbul, deemed the 2021 elections fake and a sham. But the Guardian has never liked to give voice to the vast majority of Syrians in Syria, preferring instead to quote Al-Qaeda-linked media activists and unnamed sources. So it's hardly surprising it would denigrate the event that Syrians are currently celebrating around the country. Likewise, the BBC, another contender for the most outstanding war propaganda on Syria, unsurprisingly cited the opposition as calling the elections a farce. So I want to show like some footage here about what happened in Syria. So this is Eva Bartlett's tweet. Let me pull that up for everybody to see.
Shout out to dirtbags that work at the Guardian like Luke Harding.
Yeah, shout out to them. The last night in Umayyad Square, Damascus, before and after the presidential election results were announced, a most beautiful night, Syrians celebrating their sovereignty. So does that look like people living under a dictatorship? people celebrating, how they just voted for Assad and how he won?
Yeah, there was the crowds were huge. I seen it was like a satellite image, and they were like showing the crowds. They're like, look how small the crowds are, and they're trying to like play with the.
That's how it looks. Yeah.
Yeah, like that square that they're at right now. That's like the center of Damascus, and it's just.
Anas Kasmarian says.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna get to that, Pasta. But yeah, Richard Medhurst called this like a drop in the ocean because it was the entire country that was celebrating like this.
Yeah.
So
but still, you can't were people out for fucking Biden in around what's the city center of New York or whatever. Like,
Oh,
I can promise you they
unfortunately,
were
there
here.
are people
They
honking
were
their
here.
horns, like in my city here, like right outside of
I heard
I was gonna
DC.
say, but
overwhelming
But that's
was it
'cause
like
this
a
is a
shut
bubble,
down the
though.
city, have a
Yes.
party?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone's
Nothing like what
horrible.
Obama got. Nothing like what Trump
It's because
got.
they thought that they
Oh,
voted out
nothing.
fascism. That's why.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. There's people driving around in Audis saying like, "We're free, we're free." Like,
I seen that, but I didn't see concentrations of people like actually having like a festival.
Well,
Shit.
I'm only speaking.
It's just
from what
one
I
day
saw, but it was a lot. But it was one day
for like an hour.
These people aren't the
Yeah.
brightest.
And I think a lot of
That's a lot,
Americans
but-
are driven on hate, right? Like the
Yes,
hater
yeah.
mentality. Like they were just beeping that Trump was out. They weren't beeping that Biden was in.
Right.
And you
They
know,
voted
be
against
careful
Trump.
what you fucking wish for.
I
So
was horrified. Ugh.
so here is Cenk Uygur repeating State Department talking points, saying Syrian dictator wins 95% vote in sham election. Anyone who thinks this was a real democracy election is a joke. Watch the video for the facts. Supporting dictators is not a progressive position. Of course, of course. And then Gloria replies with footage from on the ground. Look at these people celebrating here for Assad. And she said, yeah, man, Assyrians are pissed about it. What a joke, TYT. It's like, look at all these people celebrating here like the next day.
Yeah, it's obviously
After-
not how they frame it at all. I mean, there's nuance to everything, so it's silly to me that people just buy into that and don't want to know the other side of it. It's very clear people were happy.
First time I noticed that the narrative was like completely skewed about that whole situation was I went to after the Trump bombed Syria, after the Duma scandal or whatever, the fake chemical weapons attack. I went to a protest in support of Syria, and I met a bunch of Syrian people, and they were all like chanting for Assad and stuff. And I met like probably 12 of them, and they were all really nice people, and they loved Assad. And I was like, it just made me question everything that people would say. And then I would see them at like a Palestinian protest and all these other protests, anti-war protests. And I found out that they're really good people. And it's like they supported Assad because he was defending their country. And it was like it's his right under international law. I didn't debate with them further about like, did they have any disagreements with him? But they fucking love the guy. And I've never met a Syrian in Edmonton that didn't love Assad. And there's like there's a large Syrian community. And they also told me in order to get to Canada, they had to keep that like their ideology and everything like secret and not really like espouse anything until they
to get
got
into
here.
Canada.
Yeah.
And the problem with like a lot of this, like just really quick, like a lot of this very one-sided coverage for multiple reasons, and we've seen this with other countries. It's not like Syria is the first, but that then you get different viewpoints of it, like Eva's articles, and I think that inadvertently sometimes will paint these people like Assad like to be like this leader of the free world. And I'm not saying anything against him, but like when you have this really extreme reporting like on behalf of like the mainstream news, people just come up with their own conclusions or sometimes believe things that are also not true. So it's just important to see all the sides of it. And I'm not sure why people don't like to just look at all the sides of the issue. It's very basic. Nothing I'm saying is like revolutionary, but it's silly to me. And then seeing all these journalists like devolve into these like spats online. But yeah, it's just, you look at the videos, it's very obvious that there were lots of happy Syrians.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of people too, they don't realize that when you're under the boot of American imperialism or Western imperialism, right? You can't be like, all candies and rainbows. You're gonna have to do some dirty shit to fight back against that. I've heard one person in particular always talks about, she's from Cuba, and what I'm saying, progressives like to, glorify Castro in Cuba and stuff like that. But he's really bad when it comes to these things. But yeah, I mean, he had the boot of Western imperialism on his neck. He's going to do some dirty things,
It's like cause and effect.
Cuba. Yeah. That's why we're glorifying, sometimes that communist regime. But what has happened in Cuba, when you go outside the door and there's nothing but homeless people all around in America, and now we're up to 750,000. In this particular situation, I think a lot of people are doing, and in that particular video that you put up over there, that the link to the video, Frank, about the Syrian elections, she also quoted the Washington Post and this very pro-NATO German outlet, whatnot and stuff. But she did plant a seed about, Assad's father. And Assad's father has got a lot of dirty things on his plate. You know what I'm saying? He did a lot of bad things, especially when it came to Palestinians.
WikiLeaks trove of there's I think over 10,000, several thousand, that's all I know, of WikiLeaks documents about like financial corruption within the Assad government. So they're not perfect people.
They're not perfect. And just like China, right? We talk about China. China's got some shit on the table that they got to explain. They're not all rainbows and roses and stuff.
But it's international law. That's the standard that we have to uphold. It states in international law you can attack another nation, but you can defend your own nation. So therefore, no nation should ever go to war based off those principles. But if you are attacked, you have the right to respond. And that is what Assad is doing. So I grant Assad and the government of Syria that privilege.
And any country like that's trying to determine their own, way forward. You know what I'm saying? They have the right to do so. I talk about India a lot too as well. When people go, well, what's going on with Modi and this and that? And I'm like, look, if there's any country that we should just stay the hell out of and not do anything, these people got their freedom in 1945, 46, whenever they broke away from the British Empire. Let them decide their own fate. Let Syria decide their own fate. Let these countries decide their own fate. What we're doing is just using their elections and saying they're a sham, and people go, it makes sense. And then we manufacture consent to go in there for the wrong reasons, and we know it.
And that's the other thing that they're celebrating. Is they're celebrating their sovereignty. No country should interfere. And when the narrative is set against them, like right now, who's in power, like across the world, it's the Western powers, mainly the U.S. So when the narrative is set against them, then we're gonna have to be defending them like most of the time, like 99% of the time. So I wanted to show like some more of this stuff here. So Aaron Mate called out Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur. He said, want to hear a joke in this 20-minute segment about Syria, which is the link that Cenk Uygur put. Anna Kasparian touts her self-proclaimed anti-intervention ideology while failing to mention that the U.S. is occupying 1/3 of Syria, stealing its oil, and imposing murderous sanctions that prevent reconstruction. In Anna Kasparian's defense, she might not be aware of the U.S. military occupation sanctions. Her main source in this report is neocon think tanker and former Israeli soldier at Elizaril, whose Washington Post op-ed conveniently omits these pesky facts. Want to hear another joke? While promoting a dirty war supporting pro-U.S. sanctions sadist, Anna Kasparian attacks a group of peace activists who just went to Syria, attacking leftists and citing neocon warmongers, the anti-intervention ideology at the home of the progressives. So Aaron Mate was in Syria recently, but apparently Aaron Mate's takes on Syria aren't perfect either. Eva Bartlett, who we just shared an article by her, called out Aaron Mate because it was also the gray zone in entirety. They weren't perfect on Syria. And I know there's going to be people in the chat that are going to be like educating some people. Like some people in the chat I know like what the gray zones previous narratives used to be against Syria. So they haven't apologized for that yet, and that makes people like Eva Bartlett and other people from Syria upset. So Eva Bartlett called out Aaron Mate in a tweet that she deleted. Yeah, so Aaron Mate had responded here to her saying that that's not exactly what he had said, because he said, I don't think you watched it. I said that I'm not an election monitor and can't call this vote democratic given that government approves candidates, but I explicitly rejected calling election a sham and called people who do so a joke, who erase Syrians who back their government. Yeah, go ahead, Prop, before we watch this clip here.
Yeah, I want to make a quick point. So I was watching him on Katie Helper today, and I noticed he brought up the fact that like America doesn't have free and fair elections. he stated that Syria doesn't, and then he brought up America also not.
Yeah.
But it really rubbed me the wrong way because Past is here speaking on this issue a fucking lot, and Aaron Mate will only bring this fucking fact up when he's trying to make a point to save his ass or whatever.
Absolutely.
And then brings on Greg Palast.
He argues with me, right? Doesn't want to. I'm like, hey, listen, would you like to come on and debate with me, Aaron Mate? We can do it. Mike Tracy, let's go. Jordan Charity, all of them, open platform. Let's do this.
And
None of them want to come on and have a conversation with me or have me on your show.
You're not an asshole, man. You had that buddy on
Pasta's
today.
One of the nicest people I know.
And it was beautiful, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
I
read the comments after that.
In that.
The way you handled that, it was like some right-wing dude saying, like, in my opinion, pretty despicable things. And you politely called him out and debated on him and drew the line. I don't agree with you on this. And it's like, yeah, it was the most grown-up debate I've seen in a hell of a long time. And if you're scared of Pasta, then you're fucked up.
Yeah,
because they don't want to be made to look stupid or foolish, or I would say probably anything.
And they don't know about elections either, Allie.
Yeah,
right?
And they won't just say it. It's okay to not know. I mean, I suppose when you're a journalist, I don't place them on like pedestals like that, but I suppose in that position you're not used to being criticized much. If you get to that level, I would say you're not. But his answer on Twitter, what he responded to Eva, I've seen that before. Yeah. That type of response where it says, like the kind of the tone of like, well, point to me where we disagree or something like that. He'll just, or like what he said, which was just like going to these very specific little things and very blatantly missing the overall point.
The safest thing you can do when you don't know something is to always be honest. Like when you're a pundit, it's going to be used against you when you try to like weasel your way out of things and being dishonest. Just be honest, and when you don't know something, just say you don't know.
And they do great work, so I'm not against them.
Yeah,
like, they're on my side. I just think that they have to be more transparent and honest, in my opinion. Yeah, everybody wants to put up this facade like there's some kind of like fucking James Bond or something, when we're all human. Like nobody's a hero here.
Yeah. And bring on these people. Bring on these ladies. These two ladies, we know who they are. Eva Bartlett, Vanessa Beasley. We got to elevate these women because they know their shit. They're there. They're in the thick of things. And once again, I just want to point out, I do like Aaron Mate's work. I love the Gray Zone's work. I like Mike Tracy. I know a lot of people aren't crazy about him. I think he's very, very smart. And I want to leave that on the record. The third person, I'm not going to say anything about. So.
Yeah, and you've had Mike Tracy on before. You had a civil discussion with him.
Like Mike Tracy. Looked up to him. But he was great.
I think it's silly to just alienate each other and be like, well, they'd one bad take, I'm done with them. But I understand the importance of
like a lot of these
as well.
A lot of these people, like Eva Bartlett, kind of like ran the media circuit in 2016, I think, with a lot of these people. Went on Lee Camp's show, and I feel like now she's kind of being alienated because maybe some of her views don't align with other people's. But I think that you got to take the stance of just stating that you don't agree, and then you either debate it or talk about stuff that you do agree on.
Yeah.
And when you hide away, it's just a bad look.
Yeah. Or if you just don't say my bad.
Yeah.
My bad. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Apologize.
Totally.
Let's move forward.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on, what Aaron Mate said here. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust the audio here so that you guys can hear it. And then you guys can give me your take here. If you guys think that he's being honest here, or if he's just wrong, just let me know what you guys think here.
That's the context that is missing from all these sermons about how Syria had a sham election. It's just such a joke. It's such a joke. And I just wish people who mock Syria and erase its people could go there and see for themselves the sadism that they're being useful idiots for. It's just it's really, really sick. And by the way, in terms of the elections, first of all, the fact that they were held is an achievement. They've just been through a brutal war that left so much of their country in ruins. U.S. is occupying 1/3 of the country. Al-Qaeda is controlling a major province, Idlib. And then around the world, like in Lebanon, Germany, and France, when people tried to go and vote, they were stopped. That's the context that is missing from Um,
All right, and then Vanessa Beeley, who also does amazing work, just like Eva Bartlett, like on Syria and Israel, Palestine, Yemen. You guys should all follow her. She says Venezuela, China, Russia, Iraq, Lebanese resistance, Iran, Yemen, all congratulated President Assad, as did observer nations. So guess they believe elections were quote unquote democratic, whatever that means. You repeatedly say undemocratic, quote unquote undemocratic. You disagree with all above on what basis?
immediately end our own. And
See, a lot of this stems from his. Oh, sorry, you're playing the video.
I'm not going to call this a democratic election. I'm also not
Can
going
you
to call
put it
the
louder?
election really democratic
Yeah.
election. The point is, though, in context, does Assad have popular support? Undoubtedly, he does. He does. People have a hard time understanding that because he's been so demonized. But in Syria, as I saw firsthand, the choice is basically right now between Assad and it's Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda, which currently occupies the province of Idlib. The Syrian government liberated countless towns from the rule of fanatic sectarian death squads that we helped arm. Jaish al-Islam, which is armed by Saudi Arabia, Al Qaeda, all these others. No Syrians voted to be occupied by Al Qaeda or Jaish al-Islam. And when they were liberated from these towns, they were joyous, and I saw that joy firsthand. And I'm not saying that this represents the entire country. I'm sure there are some people in Syria who sided with the insurgents, although that increasingly decreased when they realized what rule was like under these people, forcing people to dig tunnels, executing people for adultery, all kinds of horrible stuff. But there's no doubt that there's a strong base of support. And you saw that, I saw it in Damascus where I was. There was a huge rally for Assad, and across the country, it was all, there's footage of it. And you just can't stage that. I have no doubt that, when people say that the ballots were counted multiple times, I have no reason to dispute that.
Yeah.
I have no evidence of it, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. But then you put it in context. First of all, they've just survived a 10-year dirty war, and this vote was actually a vote to celebrate the fact that they weren't ruled by Al Qaeda, and voting Assad as the government, as the symbol of the government, the figurehead of the government, he represents that. And there was joy about that. And so to call this a sham election is to erase all those Syrians who are thrilled that their country defeated the dirty war that we helped impose.
So Vanessa Beeley points out something that Erin Mate said there. She said, you have no reason to dispute that ballots were counted multiple times. On what evidence? You claim in almost every interview that Syria is a quote unquote police state. On what basis? You did other delegates in your group draw some conclusion during your 5 days in Syria? Why no context? And she goes on to say, you effectively say Assad is the lesser of two evils, quote unquote, better than jihadists. In this 2-minute section, you just repackage, quote unquote, regime change, talking points. Nothing will change in West Syria without journalists having courage to push the envelope further. And then I just want to pull up something Eva Bartlett said for why she called out Erin Mate, because she deleted the first tweet. Here's the tweet that she has left up on her Twitter for why she called out Erin Mate, and she said because he war propagandized against Syria for years, and it was convenient, years after the fact, to speak a little honestly about Duma, while still endorsing imperialist lexicon against Syria, to gain traction as an alternative media personality. And she said he was fed information to be able to speak about Duma, but still didn't actually know anything about Syria. And he and Grayzone heavily gleaned information from the work of Vanessa Beeley and others without credit. So guys, what are your thoughts on this?
$2019, and
You cut out a little bit, Prop. You said you seen them in 2019.
Yeah, I seen Eva in Edmonton in 2019, and she had a presentation where she spoke about Syria and all these issues. And then I rewatched the video of it, and then I watched Erin Mate on Katie Halper's show. And there was several times he word for word said the same things as she did. And now I don't know, like sometimes it's just logical conclusion. You would say the exact same things, but I also think that they were, you know, following her content and absorbing it and then repeating it without highlighting it being her. I don't know that for sure, but watching those two videos side by side, it was quite suspicious.
Yeah, I did watch the video you sent.
I think that Aaron does great work, and I think that you know, him having shitty takes in the past, it's totally fine to forget about, maybe not forget about, but to accept somebody's past and that they've changed. Frick, if you dug up my past, my goodness. You know,
we were all wrong at some point.
A long way.
Yeah, it's okay to be wrong. So that's what I don't want this to come off as, because that's who the fuck are we?
Yeah, but Aaron has a habit of this, right? Like we've seen him on Jimmy before. Start talking about Biden going how bad, and then really certainly then automatically digress into, well, you know, I'm not going to hold it against you for voting for Biden, though, because he still wants his narrative that Biden was the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
And despite everything going wrong, he still wants to hold that line. He's doing the same thing over here, too, as well, where he's going, well, you know, they voted for Assad because he's the lesser of two evils. So I wasn't wrong with the demonization back then. I just have to point out right now that it's better than ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and any other type of jihadists out there. So I understand where Vanessa's coming from. You know, I mean, there's a reason why Vanessa, through her reporting, and Eva, through their reporting, feel that a lot of people like Assad. And that's because he's fought back the West, not because he's just better than the jihadists and stuff like that. You know, I mean, it's a very, like, it's a form of virtue signaling of sorts that's kind of in there, whatnot, that really just needs to go away and say, hey, man, I was wrong. The people of Syria, the majority of them, they love Assad because he fought back the West. And that's that. And that's why they voted for him. They trust him, and we should let them decide their own sovereignty, you know, move forward with that. Instead of saying, well, you know, it's because he was the lesser of two evils.
Oh, yeah, he's the lesser of two evils.
A lot of this beef is coming from, you know, like Vanessa and Eva have both been to those places in dangerous times, and have been there a lot more. You can go to their YouTube channels, and there's like crazy videos. There's one of Eva going through like an ISIS cave, and it comes to like an ISIS headquarters next to a White Helmet's headquarters, and she's like going through this cave, goes in all the buildings, all this stuff. So she probably feels disrespected that, you know, a lot of people are giving Aaron all of this credit for a lot of like her reporting in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I definitely grant her like those feelings or whatever. And I feel like if Twitter is the worst place for these things because it escalates fighting. And I feel like if you made a video explaining it, it would come off less
less confrontational.
You wouldn't want her message. Yeah,
less
you wouldn't want her
personal.
message to get lost. Less personal, and getting lost in like all the mess that is Twitter. But I'm sure she was frustrated. It seems as though, you know, rightfully so, after years of being cast aside, even though you said that she was kind of running in those circles for a while until maybe her positions became more and more unpopular for those that are trying to get that access or maintain that access and look out for their career. It all makes sense. It's just, you hate to see that because I wouldn't want her message to get lost is all.
I can tell you that it does get a little personal at times and stuff when people do ignore you or blow you off or don't cite the original work that you did too. Well, I get that way, you know what I'm saying? Because I feel like, you know, not that it's just personal and hurt my feelings, but also that the message is kind of getting twisted away from what actually happens. And you want to be a part of that whole process to say, hey, you know what I'm saying? You know, I've been blown off by certain people and I'm like, okay, all right. You know what I'm saying? And it's a personal thing. And it's not just about the being blown off. Sometimes it goes to the heart of the issue. And I think when it comes to Vanessa and Eva, is that they were at the heart of the issue, what was going on in Syria.
Yeah.
So, you know, they walk the walk. They want to be able to talk the talk. And when it's spun a different way and, you know, then you see that type of group or that outlet get a little bit more attention on that work, which isn't as accurate as the work that you're doing on the ground. hey, you
It
know, I
has to
mean,
be
comes
infuriating,
into
especially
play.
like because
Yeah.
the time they've spent there, the connections they've made just with the people. That's a real connection that you want to be able to channel the word what you've heard from them. And so that's great that Aaron went there, but just being objective, like let's see who's going to have more experience, like really personally with different Syrians. It would be Eva. So I understand the frustration. Yeah,
Well,
just like Prop was saying, I hate on Twitter how people will frame that. It's like, oh, she's just being
And then people
petty
take
because she didn't get
jealous and
sides.
credit.
anxious and emotional and
Yeah.
hurt and pissed
Yeah, it's
off.
not.
And
I'm not
this
into
is like
that.
about the personal connection between them two is what, they're going to say. But, I mean, it also allows us to understand a pecking order, whatnot, of where to get the real information from. I go to Vanessa and Eva first when it comes to Syria. You know what I'm saying? Then I'll go to Moon on Alabama, right? And then I'll take a look at the gray zone. It used to be different. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Now it's
yeah.
like, okay, I like what they're saying, but still, these people seem to be there on the ground and have a better perspective, a more understandable perspective, a more clear perspective of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Also-
understanding the motivations behind those journalists too. Of course, it's getting information out there, but there's a lot more than just getting information out there. It's access, it's money, it's your career. So look and see who has more to lose in a sense. That's what I would say. I don't think look enough at people's motivations behind why they do what they do.
I also think that Aaron should hear these kind of criticisms because he does great reporting, but he picks and chooses his words a lot.
Quite calculated.
Some ways I admire his refrain. He won't engage in slander and cliches and I don't know, just super
Just
like he
pettiness
stays
and
away from
shit.
rudeness and
I see.
Yeah.
sexism and all these other things. But a lot of the times he'll pick and choose who he'll present himself with or associate himself with, and I think that is is kind of dangerous. And I think playing it safe is sometimes good, and only using information when you know it's factual. But I think that speculating and being open with your ideology and all this other stuff helps people trust you more.
Mhm.
And when
More
I
human.
don't really like watching Aaron in a lot of ways because I know that he's dialing it back when there's people that are giving you the raw thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are all very great
calculated
takes
and
you all gave.
methodical.
And I just to clarify for people, this is constructive criticism. All right, we know these people, and at the end of the day, they're on our side. And we also want to understand, why Eva Bartlett feels this way. She busts her ass, putting herself in dangerous situations, which is
Yeah, her
what
life
journalists
in
are supposed to
danger.
do. Yeah. And then to see someone who isn't as deep into like what's going on in Syria as she is, going on like the Jimmy Dore show or going on Katie Halper's show, people are defending him from attacks that he was getting from TYT. And then she's like, what about all the work that I've done? Like, no one's like paying attention to this. Like, people need to be more informed. And then also, the things that you guys were all saying, where Aaron's picking his words carefully. He's not going deep enough into this issue.
And let me say something too, Frank. That's the criticism this crew has, right? It's like, okay, we get it. Aaron Mate has done some great work. He's awesome. Okay, well, let's go a little further, right? Let's go a little bit deeper there, Jimmy. Let's get these Evas on your show, these Vanessas on your show, and I understand that, and that's why it's such a nuanced criticism coming from this particular crew. I'm talking about the people in our fam and everybody on this show right now. We say this stuff all the time. You know what I'm saying? We want to see Annie Jacobson on that show, on Jimmy's show, because it's not that we just like Jimmy, we love the fact that he's got a huge audience and he reaches a lot of people, and that work needs to be elevated. And that's why I think we get so critical sometimes, at least the people in this group of Jimmy, is because he's not going that far and that deep down the hole. We want to see those people elevated.
Robbie Yeager, all these people.
I would make a call to Jimmy and Eva, because I don't know who's telling the truth in this or whatever. I've never heard Eva talk about it. But people in the comments have super chatted Jimmy, hey, get Eva back on, because Jimmy has had Eva on. And he's like, yeah, she could call it. I told her to call up anytime and I'll have her on like that. And I don't know if he is actually exploring guests, because my love for Jimmy was when he had on many different guests and you could learn about all these different topics. Same with Lee Camp. I found out about Eva Bartlett through Lee Camp, interviewing her in 2015 or 16.
But
Yeah,
and
so
then it
so
leads
I
you to
think
ask, why won't they?
so I think that I love Aaron. I love his work. His dad is a fucking like a great writer and a freaking important intellectual, in my opinion. And Aaron's work has actually convinced his dad, who is a powerful political figure and intellectual figure in Canada and throughout the world even, that this whole Syria stuff and the Duma attack is all like a hoax, and it's all like the narrative is not what it seems. So Aaron does have validity, but we need to explore other people. So I'm calling Jimmy to like have Eva on, make that phone call, force her to go on. Like if she's busy, make a fucking time.
And that's a great question that Ali was asking. Yeah, that's a great question. That's what it leaves us with, because it's been years since they've had them on, if they've had them on at all. So it's like, why aren't they having them on? That's the question that they leave us with.